Hello, everyone. I'm Jason Cohen, the author of An Introduction to the Art and Science of Chinese Tea Ceremony. Today, we're discussing Book 2, Chapter 10, Section 8, Reduction Firing Wu Hui Black Yixing. Here to talk about this chapter is our editorial team, Zongjun
Hello, hello.
and Emily Huang.
Hi.
Hello, everyone. For listeners, Pat might be able to join us quite soon, so if so, we will catch him up. My first question, what is Wu Hui?
So Wu Hui basically translates to smoldering ashes. And these type of Yixing pots tend to be black, dark gray, blackish in color, and it's produced through a reduction firing process.
And very interestingly, there are a lot of different confusing names for Wu Hui. And one way you can spell Wu Hui as a different character, but it's also pronounced as Wu Hui, which means covered ash. But the ash part remains the same, which is a very important component of this process.
So smoldering ash or covered ash are the two ways of characters both pronounced the same way. So Wu Hui is a reduction-fired Yixing ware. Is that right?
That's right.
And this reduction firing renders the clay black. So can this process be done to any clay, only specific clays? It is not itself a black firing clay?
Yeah, any clay, as long as it contains any iron content, which is a very important component for the black colorization.
When were Wu Hui's wares first made, and when did they become desirous or popular?
The exact invention date of Wu Hui is unknown, but people can find traces of Wu Hui wares date back to Ming Dynasty. But it was really getting popularized during Qing and early ROC, mainly by this guy called Cheng Shouzhen, or Bingxing Daoren. He's a major teapot maker himself and commissioner during the late Qing, early ROC period. And he himself is a person from the town of Yixing. So a very first-hand interaction with the production and popularization of this ware.
What led to it becoming popular? So these things exist. They're actually accidental firings at first. They're actually considered a flaw at first. So was it he who popularized it, or what happened where people began to desire black-colored Yixing?
Are you looking
Good
for a
question.
specific date? Because I feel like there's we don't have a specific date, and
No.
kind of like a gradual. At first, there wasn't a lot of it, and then as people start to find out what it is, they get more attracted on the black because it's so special and rare.
Exactly. It goes from special and rare, so people learn how to produce it regularly. And then what happens?
Yeah, then people start to producing intentionally. Wu Hui itself is a type of yaobian initially. And people didn't know exactly what happened, why these wares accidentally turned black. And then later on, they figure out the mechanism of how to create this effect intentionally. And that became a type of technique.
How did the process of Wu Hui change as demand for these wares grew?
Yeah, so as Zongjun and Jason mentioned earlier, Wu Hui is a type of yaobian process. Wu Hui became more popular as more people knew about it. So even though it wasn't very consistent at first, the artists were able to realize it's due to the ashes that were accumulated at the bottom of the kiln when firing. And as time advances, they were able to find different ways to replicate that condition. So along with the introduction of electric kilns, for example, they were able to use electric kilns as a second or third firing for a more controlled temperature.
Yeah. So once demand grows, everybody can only think about how do we increase the quantity, right? So in the very beginning, all of these are happen very accidentally in the bottom of the dragon kiln, where, as Emily said, all the ashes will accumulate over those regions and accidentally produce a very reductive atmosphere. But later on, as people figure out how to recreate that kind of condition, they put it in a push bed, they put it in shuttle kiln, and then eventually they put it into an electric kiln. And the methods were largely pretty identical, like you just stuffed the whole saggart with straws or rice husk. and stuff the teapot inside out. They figure out that if you didn't stuff the teapot inside, like there will be a color difference between the inside of the teapot and the outside. So that's one thing that I found quite interesting. And Jason and I were doing some research about how to create a reduction environment in electric kiln because it's not heated through combustion. And apparently there is this new technology where they would create reduction gas from a different chamber and blow that into the electric kiln to create a reductive environment. So without a husk and a rice straw inside the sagger, you can create Wu Hui with modern technology.
I think that this is a great underexplored example of how a natural or perhaps incidental variation in a craft process can lead to the development of new techniques to make what was previously rare suddenly available because it became preferred, because it was preferred because it was rare, and it was rare because it was an accident. And so they figure out how to consistently create this, and suddenly it becomes a trend. And Wu Hui was never a dominant trend, but did this additional availability cause Wu Hui to grow or fall in stature? What happened to price? What happened to demand? And were they more preferred when they were formed by accident, or did their stature grow when they became suddenly available on the open market?
That's a really interesting question. So, from a supply and demand perspective, what started with a very special, rare accident Wu Hui wares, with its increasing demand, and then artists is starting to find out ways to replicate it. Of course, supply increased, and therefore the price would go down. Interestingly, what used to be so rare and special, only one out of a million very special wares, suddenly became not so special anymore because there were a lot of it in the market. And more people from different backgrounds are buying it for different reasons.
That's right, that's not cool anymore. The price, of course, fell drastically, but now it's more accessible. So actually the demand continues to grow. And for regular tea drinkers, regular consumers, what once was such artistic rarity, now it's just readily available out in the market. So actually there were more people buying Wu Hui after the production method is cracked to render such effect on the teapot. So that's quite interesting. But later on, this method got a little bit abused for some makers and merchants to use inferior quality clay or clay colorization to market what it's a made up term for haney or black clay. But it's indeed either a lower quality clay or a clay mixed with a lot of manganese or other types of colorizers. So this is very sad, but that's a reality that led to a mixed reputation of Wu Hui later on.
Are all black colored tissue wares made from the Wu Hui process?
Well, if it's pitch black, then most likely it's from Wu Hui. But you can use some very naturally dark clay and mix with some kind of manganese colorizers to make it look more black. But you can still tell from the color that it's a little bit brownish, grayish, it has more depth. But if it's like really, really black, that's usually happened through a reduction fired atmosphere.
Or a very contemporary colorizer.
Yeah, for very advanced modern technology.
Modern types. You're talking about antique teapots. If the antique teapot is truly a deep black, that's Wu Hui. Otherwise, maybe a little manganese in ROC or sometimes kiln ash.
Yeah, for those really modern wares, green tea and black tea out, I don't know. Don't use that.
Foul smelling shoe polish teapot. We touched on this already, but we had said that an important component of the depth of coloration and the intensity of the black color of the Wu Hui ware is based on its iron content. But there are low iron content position materials. So what happens if you take like a nearly no iron content loonie and you fire that Wu Hui? Is that a good idea? Does anyone do that? What's the outcome?
The outcome would be no one knows. Oh, I guess we have to try it.
New combustion idea.
Because of the reduction firing process, the color will definitely be darker. But as Jason mentioned, the depth and the shade of dark black color really depends on the iron content. So a lower iron content clay would give out a not as dark, not as black color.
Well, my suspicion is that you are definitely going to see some color changes. It's not just iron getting oxidized or reduced through the chemical reaction. But without a large amount of iron content, certainly it's not going to turn into a very black color. Probably into some kind of a grayish hue or grayish brown color. And also depending on the firing temperature too.
Yeah. I think the loony stuff comes out a bit sickly looking. So no one really does it. Just kind of a pale gray, an imitation of Wu Hui black. So that said, then are certain clay types more or less common? We know obviously loony is very uncommon, but what about other clay types? Is one clay type most often done Wu Hui, or is it just other than the low iron clays, anything's done in equal proportion?
I would say from my personal experience and after talking to artists in Yixing, mostly Zini. It's the most accessible, decent quality clay out there in the market. And people tend not to use higher quality Juni for Wu Hui because it's like putting very high quality tea leaf from Yiwu and turning it into a shoupu'er. It's good, but you can do it, but at what cost? You can sell it at a much higher price on its own. So,
Yeah, Lao Banjiang show.
wow, that hurts my ears just by hearing it.
Yeah, actually, I think I've mentioned this before. So I have two responses to that. One is that I actually do have a modern Junie Wu Hui,
Oh, no.
and I have no idea why I bought this. I never want to brew tea in this. I don't know what I was thinking. I saw it pop up. I'm like, never heard of that before. I mentioned this on the AMA. This is like one of the teapots that I kind of regret buying, even though there's nothing wrong with it. It's Wu Hui Junie. It's high-end Junie. But yeah, I don't know what I was thinking there. The other thing, though, actually thinking through what's used most often, it's interesting that you said Zinni. I would have assumed Hongni. In a way, my assumption is that we don't really know, right? Like going back, particularly Dragon Kiln era, most of the clays were actually blends. Having pure single clay is relatively rare up through until late Qing, early ROC, and even in the ROC they were doing blends, and you don't get pure sealed process clays until the F1. F1 didn't fire Wu Hui. So my assumption is we don't really know, and it's likely that it was some mix of Ziti Hongmi blends that were really getting turned into Wu Hui in small amounts. But I'd be open to debate on that. I don't think that anyone's ever undertaken a study of clay types of Wu Hui material before.
I guess we are going to have to collect all of the antique Wu Hui and then do a reverse fire of those teapot.
Figure out what they are. What are the material effects of the Wu Hui process on Zisha material? Specifically in the interaction with tea. What are the material effects of Wu Hui in its interaction with tea?
It's found that the Wu Hui wares tend to give a more well-rounded effect on the flavor profile of tea. So that means muting of the base and more subtle mid notes, but accents the high notes and the sweetness of the tea.
Yeah, after some usage, I actually only find Wu Hui be good for shoupu or certain types of tea, Hongcha. I tried with some other tea types, didn't come out as well.
That's modern Wu Hui that you're using, and you're finding it's mostly for Hongcha. Is that right, Zongjun?
Yeah, that's right. I do not own any antique Wu Hui, but it's a contemporary Wu Hui fired with some aged Zini.
Yeah, that basically matches my experience. I've had difficulty pairing Wu Hui with most tea types. I found some Hongchas that it works with, but then I took some Yunnan Daiye Hongcha closer to a benching fermenting note than a light, beautiful Dianhong, and it just brought out all of the gaminess. It was gamiest expression of a Yesheng Daiye Hongcha that I've had, and it was a tea that I liked too. It was a terrible pairing. That I found pretty confusing.
Funky.
Yeah, because I usually think of it as fairly muting and intensifying on sweetness. But I guess if you're pulling out large molecules, sweetness in a tea, that if the tea has a gamey base flavor, that you're going to just extract all of that as well.
You're missing all the mid notes. Wow, this is almost like a chosha method.
Yeah, chosha for tea extraction. That's interesting. I would like to do, and we will do for this book, more experimentation on Wu Hui. One of our triplet sets, we have Wu Hui, and we should probably do some more experimentation, be able to both quantify and qualify the teas that it pairs best with.
Well, I would love to use it more. It is a cool looking ware. Has a very metallic kind of texture. It gloss this really cool radiant under light. It's a nice looking effect. I just wish I can use it more.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you remember what red teas it's done well with? Because it certainly hasn't done well with the Fengqings or the Yixing Hongcha.
I tried with some Taiwanese honey red tea. Those are mixiang honey aroma red tea. Those are good. And Dianhong tastes pretty fine in my teapot, in my Wu Hui, and some of the decent quality shoupu. But I've tried Dancong, Yancha, and they all taste weird.
Yeah. I've had good luck with my coastal Fujian red teas and Taiwanese red teas, stranded red teas. I have a high mountain summer harvest red tea right now. I should give that a try. I tried it with a bug bitten tea jasmine red tea. That was quite good. Last question. Why are Wu Hui wares coming back into vogue? 5 or 10 years ago, we rarely saw contemporary Wu Hui, and now they're commonly available, commonly produced by our preferred Zisho artisans. What changed?
I feel like in a macro trend cycle way, it's like a opposing thing, right? You get very detailed and you want lots of variations, lots of colors, and then oh, actually, I want something more simpler. We can see this in a lot of the brand designs, like fashion and all that, from lots of variations, lots of details, and then back to, hey, I just want like simple, like the clay itself, and appreciate the nature of what it is. A couple of years back, McDonald's introduced all of their packaging black. Did you guys know that?
No, I do not.
Back in the days where everyone was looking for unique color cars, from bright red to green or blue. And then recently, everyone's going back to like black or midnight black or something that's simpler, that's more
Just white or
kinda
silver.
low contact, low profile, but high classy look. And to me, Wu Hui is just like that. It's classy.
I feel like we're having a Mad Men era conversation. We need something that's simple, refined, timeless. We'll do it in black.
I think I will agree with Emily on that one. It's not just about the color, it's also the teapot design too. Back in the days, you see all of these crazy shaped teapot actually built for China, for people who are drinking tea. And nowadays, people like not only don't use those very colorful regularly, but also people prefer their tea wares to look more natural in color, less of a chosha, tiaosha, or color speckle design, and to be their regular usage for tea drinking. So that's quite a macro trend that's happening in general, I think. What do you think, Jason? Will you buy more Wu Hui teapot in the future?
Maybe for collection purposes, but I have one antique. I actually have too many Wu Hui teapots. Why do I have so many Wu Hui teapots? I have one Jusha, one Juni, one antique, one different mine Juni, one Dendron Juni, and one Zinni. I don't know why I have so many. I never want to use them, so probably not. So for the book, I think I'm going to keep these around and I'm going to use them. We're going to profile them and everything, but these might be on the deaccession list as much as that pains me. But a couple of them are really nice, of course. Have one of our design octagonal commissioned wares done in Wuhui. And then my antique one has the most interesting textures, this incredibly dense, rubbery note. And it's actually a Duani antique Wu Hui from a high iron Duani that would have had the red speckles in it, like a Jinma Dorli almost. but a little smaller than that and more even. But to try to answer my own question, I don't think we know fully. I don't think there's any one reason why Wu Hui wares are back in vogue. I think that this is just part of the pendulum swinging, that the technology was there. We knew how to make them. Merchants and digital artisans were legitimately looking for differentiation and new things that they could do, and looking back towards tradition, which is something that we as practitioners like it when they do, whether that's Sangu or bringing back older techniques. And they found that they could run this older technique identically with contemporary technology. And so they started to make it, and people said, oh, look, black Yixing, real black Yixing, not dosed and colorized, not using modern techniques, but using traditional techniques, and began to collect them and desire them. And so we actually fell exactly into the same pattern as the literati of old. We saw something new. We saw something that was higher status. We saw something that our brains didn't have. We started to buy them. Everyone else wanted them. Producers started to make more of them. And now we think, oh, Wu Hui, that's everywhere. We can have it in whatever clay we want. Any contemporary maker has their Wu Hui. And I think that just goes to show how much consistency there is in human nature, how much that this art form remains guided by these types of traditional buying cycles. We are the literati of today. And I think that the confluence of those things is such an interesting insight to how much and how little has changed. And so we're on this side of the pendulum, and in 5 years from now, we'll be saying, Wu Hui, well, who buys Wu Hui anymore?
It was once a cool thing to own, and that was a very high starting point.
Yeah.
And then, as I said, we have several vacuums in its development that Wu Hui is not cool anymore. And then now it's coming back. It's retro cool. So
thank you, everyone, for joining us in this edition of Tea Technique Editorial Conversations. Please join us again for our next conversation, Flaws in Zisha Clay.